You see, at just the right time, while we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us.
How can you refuse him now? How can you refuse him now? How can you turn away from his side? With tears in his eyes, on the cross there he died. How can you refuse Jesus now?
Some of the governor's soldiers took Jesus into their headquarters and called out the entire regiment. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. They wove thorn branches into a crown and put it on his head. And they placed a reed stick in his right hand as a scepter. Then they knelt before him in mockery and taunted, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him, and they grabbed the stick and struck him on the head with it. When they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off the robe and put on his own clothes again. Then they led him away to be crucified.
There's a story old that is often been told of how our Savior died. As they nailed his hands, he cried, "They don't understand." As the blood flowed from his side.
And they went out to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. The soldiers gave Jesus wine mixed with bitter gall, but when he tasted it, he refused to drink it. After they nailed him to the cross, they gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. Then they sat around and kept guard as he hung there.
As he hung there on the tree, he prayed for you and prayed for me. There was no one his pain to ease. Before he died, he faintly cried, "Father, forgive them, please."
Two others, both criminals, were led out to be executed with him. When they came to a place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross, and the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." And the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice.
How can you refuse him now? How tears in his eyes on the cross there he died. How can you refuse Jesus now?
By this time, it was about noon, and darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. The light from the sun was gone. And suddenly, the curtain in the temple was torn down the middle. Then Jesus shouted, "Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands." With those words, he breathed his last.